Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to leave this open for a couple minutes as people join. So we are here today for the ACT workshop, the first one in a three-part series. And I'm going to launch a poll here just so that I can get to know you guys a little bit better before we begin. So let me launch that. So if you can respond, that would be great. I also sent out a diagnostic questionnaire to you guys, and I didn't get that many responses. So I'm going to share that again. So if you can, please fill this out if you haven't already. Let me just share that. So I am going to be sharing this in the chat box. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, that's where you're going to see the link to the questionnaire. And let me see here. So a lot of 11th graders today. You guys are quick filling out this poll. Wow. Let's see here. And most of you, it looks like, will be taking the ACT for the first time. Possibly in July. Okay, I will keep this poll open just for a couple more minutes, and then I will share the results with everyone so you can also see how other people voted. So I did share that questionnaire too in the chat box. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You can see me, I cannot see you, I can't hear you. So if you're in your PJs or have a noisy puppy in the room with you, that's okay, it won't disrupt our session today. Did anyone not receive an email from me with the workshop materials for today? If you did not receive one, can you just type in the chat box that you didn't? And then I will share the link to that email so that I can be sure that everyone has the workshop materials for today. I'm just going to keep my eyes on the little chat box there to see if anyone did not receive that email. And I'll be sending out a follow-up email too, and I will be updating that workshop folder with the answer key for practice test 2019 to 2020. Okay, so Patrick says that he did not, so let me just share that link. Just gonna grab it really quickly here, and then we'll get started in about a minute. So I'm gonna give it another minute for any latecomers to join before we jump in. Now's a really good time to fill out that questionnaire that I put in the chat box. If you haven't yet, I'm going to be refreshing that in just a minute here, and I'd love to see some more responses so that I can see what you guys are starting with, what you know, what you like, what you don't like about the ACT. And then I can tailor this a little bit more to your specific weaknesses. Okay, so that's the link to the email that I just sent. And then let me see your responses here to the poll. Looks like most of you are in Florida. Quite a few of you will be taking the ACT this July. More 11th graders, but we have every grade represented here today, so that's great. And then, let's see here. It's about a 50-50 split almost between students who have taken the ACT and have not. Well, 36-64, it's not quite 50-50. So I'm going to end this poll and I will share the results. So you guys can check that out. And then let me just pull up your questionnaire results so that I can see what you guys think about the ACT. So let's see here, and I can actually, let me share my screen here too, so you guys can see how other people responded to this questionnaire. So I'll share my screen in a second. So just to get started today, This is ACT Workshop 1. It's out of its 3-part series that I am offering in partnership with the Safety Harbor Public Library. So last year, I offered these in person, which was so much fun. We had big groups of students and we were at the library. This year, due to COVID-19, I am offering these virtually from my living room here in Safety Harbor, Florida. So I live pretty close to the library, so it's as close as we're gonna get to having this in the library for the summer, but I'm really excited to be offering this to give more students the opportunity to learn the ins and outs of the ACT and do better. So my name is Carla. I have been offering ACT and SAT prep for over 10 years. So most of my students I'm going to be meeting with on a one-on-one basis. So that's predominantly what I do. But then I also offer paid courses and then free workshops through the library and a variety of programs just to make sure that all students have the opportunity to learn the basics about the ACT and go into the test knowing what they need to. So if you have any questions throughout this workshop, please use the chat box. You can either message me directly or you can set it to sending the message to all panelists and attendees, and then everyone would see your message, not just me. You can also use the Q&A feature to submit questions, and those can be submitted either with your name or anonymously. If you don't want to share your name, that's okay too. I love getting questions, so if at any point you want me to go back and go over something again, or you don't quite understand what's going on, those would be great opportunities to ask questions. So I am going to structure these workshops that every week we are going to kind of cover a different ACT practice test. So there will be 3 in total covered over the 3 workshops. So I encountered a little bit of an obstacle with the first workshop because assigning a whole practice test for you guys to complete before we have ever met is a little bit cumbersome. So for today, I am just going to be going over what you need to know for the ACT, and then I'm going to give you an assignment for the second workshop. And after you have completed that assignment and you've worked through the sections that I've assigned, you will be able to actually submit questions before the second workshop for anything that you maybe want us to go over again. So it's a very easy system. You just put check marks next to the questions that you would like to go over. Something that I ask of you is that before you submit a question, to first look at my answer key and see if my solution makes sense. So I'm going to be giving you written out solutions to each question on any ACT that I assign. So I would want you to go through those and see, does this make sense? Do I understand it? And then if you still don't get the concept and it still doesn't make sense, that would be a good question for you to submit for us to go over during workshop 2. And then we would follow the same process for workshop 3. So I'm going to stop sharing the poll results here. Let me just close this. A lot going on in my screen. And then I will show you guys the responses to the diagnostic. Let's pull this up. Boop. Okay, let me have it right here. And then I will share the screen. Okay, so it looks like math is our most popular section. Out of the 6 people that have responded so far, we have 16 joining us here today. So if you have not filled out this diagnostic yet, please do so. I will look at it again before workshop 2 and again before workshop 3. So it's never too late to chime in with this and to enter whatever information you maybe struggle with more. So math was the most popular. So this system is very similar to what I use for practice tests after you've looked at them, so that I can see what are the trouble spots for most students, and those are the ones that I look at during workshops and courses. So here we have different grammar concepts, Let's see, 100% for that question right there. And then for math, you can see there's definitely trends, right? When we have students submit their responses to this diagnostic, I can definitely see what are the areas that you may be a little rustier on than others. And then science, physics is always the #1 response here for what kind of science questions students like least. So out of every one of these that I've hosted so far, physics is always the #1 response. And then also comparing two passages, students generally don't like as much. So Brooke asks, how do we fill out the diagnostic? And let me just share this link again. So this was in the email that I sent out to everyone, but here's the link too. So you can work on that as I'm talking if you're able to multitask. If you're not the best multitasker, just wait until we're done today to fill out that form. So we have all these responses here. And then what would you like to learn during the workshop series? These are some good responses. Let's just take a second here. So study tips and methods, strategies to help make the ACT easier to complete. We're definitely going to be looking at those. How to move quicker through the ACT. So the ACT is known as a very fast test, and it can create problems for a lot of students when time gets brought in. So if I gave you a whole day to just leisurely work through an ACT practice test, you would probably score way higher than if I sit you down and I time each section. So that is across the board an issue for most students. And it doesn't matter if you are a straight A student or an A and B student, or you get straight C's, everyone struggles with that. Let's see here. How to learn helpful test taking strategies. Honestly, I have no clue. That's a great response too. Sometimes we don't know what we need to learn if we don't even know what there is to learn, right? And then balancing time efficiently. So I'm going to stop this share and then let's dive into everything we need to cover today. So today's going to be pretty speedy. I will be sharing a recording of this session with you guys. So if at any point you are kind of losing focus or you feel like it's just too much information thrown at you all at once, you can always go back and rewatch this recording and revisit those topics, pause it, take some notes, and so forth. So you should all have access to the email that I sent out, which takes you to the Google Drive folder. And let me just pull that up here too. So this is a little bit of an orientation. I won't be doing this every week since I think most of you will be here for all 3 workshops. And I will send out the recording of the first one for anyone joining us later on. So let me pull up the workshop materials here, just to kind of give you guys an overview of this. So I'm going to share this screen. Okay, so you should have access to this link in your email, the SHPL ACT workshop series. SHPL stands for the Safety Harbor Public Library when partnering with to offer these this summer. So you will see a couple of folders within here. The core material we will be using for every single workshop. So this is important stuff that you need to start memorizing basically for the ACT. So this stuff is not gonna go away, the core material folder. In here, we have a grammar handout. This grammar handout is amazing for preparing for both the ACT and the SAT. If the grammar concept is not in this handout, it's not on the ACT. So you definitely want to know everything in here before you take the English section of the ACT. What's really great about this handout is it's only, I think, 14 pages long. Yeah, 14 pages. And it gives you the grammar rule, and then it also gives you 2 examples for each one, how not to use it, so what would be wrong and what would be correct. So it's really useful for if you need to dive a little bit deeper and understand what's going on with some grammar rules that you maybe don't use that often. I also have this English core concepts handout in here. So this is a one-pager kind of cheat sheet for the ACT English section. So of course, I don't want you to actually take this in with you on test day. I want you to start memorizing it so it's all in your brain. So if you are going through the English section and you come across a question where no change is an option and you're not sure, is this no change? Do I just pick the original or do I need to fix something here? You have a mental checklist of all the grammar rules you need to think through. So you can think of, is this a redundancy issue? Is this a subject-verb agreement issue? And if you give all of those a check mark that each one of these is okay, you can just select no change and keep the original. So this right here is basically a condensed version of that big 14-page grammar handout. And then in here, we also have the core concepts and critical thinking skills handout. So I have two in here. One is the blank copy. So that means you can add in some additional information or practice filling out some of the math formulas and equations that you'll need to know for the ACT. And then I also have my key. So my key has everything filled out already in here. How many of you, and I should have made this a poll question, but I forgot, have any of you not attended an ACT bootcamp of mine? Just raise your hand if you have not ever had an ACT bootcamp with me. Okay, so Lauren, Daniela, Case, Jet. But I think the majority here with me today have had my ACT bootcamp. So I'm going to share a recording that's hosted on YouTube of my ACT bootcamp. And in that, I go through this document with a fine-tooth comb. So I go through each one in detail. I'm not going to do that today. Over each workshop, we will be revisiting this. So it's not that I'm not going to walk you through this at all, but we do have that information in the ACT bootcamp. It's 3 hours long. So this document is pretty short. Look how short it is. It's only 5 pages, but it takes about 3 hours to get through it. So it's really dense. And if you're going to be taking the ACT soon, I can't encourage you more to watch that ACT bootcamp. So the first page, we just have common test taking things that you need to know for the ACT. The next page, we have our reading strategy as just half a page, our English strategy as half a page. So I'm sure you are noticing a little bit of a trend here with the English section. There's that 14-page document that gives you great examples, explains each thing. And then I have that one-pager cheat sheet that's a little bit of a step down from that 14-page document. And then we just have a half pager here. So if you are reviewing the English strategy the night before the ACT, this is the part you would be looking at. When you look through this, maybe right now it doesn't all make sense, but at that point, this should just be a really quick review for you of, oh yeah, I remember to do that. And then our science strategy, I gave this an entire page. I probably didn't need to, but it's important for students to understand the different types of questions and how often they appear on the ACT science section. The most important part here is going to be this first column, our pacing, what the goal is of the science section, annotating, looking for trends, strategies, and that's basically it for the most important details that you need to know for the science section. And we will be revisiting each part of this document, as I mentioned before, throughout the workshops. But if you want a really detailed explanation of all of this, I can't encourage you more to go watch that ACT bootcamp. If you have had an ACT bootcamp with me and it has been a while, pull up that recording and just skip the parts you remember and rewatch the parts that you might be a little bit rusty on. So that's our science strategy. And then our final page here, the math strategy. So for math, I have one page front and back filled with information you absolutely need to know and understand to do well on the ACT math section. So just to give you a little bit of a background on this ACT core concepts and critical thinking skills handout, for those of you who are new to me and have never met me before, I have spent years breaking down what are the questions and what are the concepts that the ACT test students on all the time. So there will be questions, especially in math, that reappear every now and then on the ACT, but it's not a guaranteed question type. So when you are first starting to prep for the ACT, and let's say you want a 32 on the ACT math section, this is the stuff you absolutely need to know. Once you start aiming for above a 32, so you're going into the 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 range, you're going to have to start diving a little bit deeper than what is in this handout. And maybe as you miss questions, add those concepts on here. So by the time you take the test, this should have a lot of your own writing on here. So Emma asks, for the colleges that require you to submit every time you take the ACT, SAT, will we have to submit if we retake a single section of the ACT? I don't know. So we are kind of still waiting to see how colleges are going to react to the single section retake that the ACT is offering starting this September. So I would expect that colleges who want you to submit every single ACT or SAT score that you've ever had would also want to see those scores. In past years, that would be my expectation, but with some schools going test optional, they may be a little bit more lenient on that this upcoming admission cycle for 2020 to 2021 and then 2021 to 2022. So we'll see a little bit what happens with that. It remains to be seen. Don't know yet. So here we have our math strategy. And for today, I am going to dive into just one part of this that I want to make sure everybody knows super well, because we're going to be keeping on coming back to it for the math section. And that is our little calculator mini paragraph right here, what you need to know on your graphing calculator. So that's what we're going to start with today. But as part of your first assignment, I'm going to want you to either rewatch that ACT Bootcamp if it's been a while, or watch it if you have never had an ACT Bootcamp with me before, so that you can understand every single part of this, because it takes a while. It's not a quick thing. Okay, so I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to just launch a really quick poll before we dive into the calculator to see what kind of calculators you guys are working with. So let's see here. There we go. So you should see a calculator poll pop up on your screen. The first question is just, do you have a graphing calculator? Then I want to know, which kind are you working with? And then lastly, if you have any of these specific graphing calculators, I'm curious. And then for certain features in here, I want to know if you've ever used them and how comfortable you feel with them, if you have used them. I'm just going to give you a second, well, longer than a second, probably about a minute. And while you, yep, let's see here. Some of you are definitely really fast at filling out these polls. Okay. Half of you have responded so far, so I'll just give it another minute for everyone to fill this out. Once we get to 15, I will share these results so you guys can also see it. Let's see, I'll give it 30 more seconds and then that will be it. And if you don't have your graphing calculator with you right now, definitely go grab that really quickly too, because we're going to be looking at things you can do in the graphing calculator. Okay, let me share these results with you guys so you can also see. It looks like most of you have a graphing calculator. If you don't have one and you live near Safety Harbor, you're in Florida, you can go borrow one from the Safety Harbor Public Library. So they actually have several of these that students can borrow for taking the ACT or SAT, or even just to use to practice on. I really think it gives students a huge advantage on the math section to be using a graphing calculator. This is my preferred graphing calculator for the ACT and the SAT. If you are using the TI-84 Plus, it's also a great calculator. It can do most of what this one can do. If you have the option to borrow this one from a friend, if you don't have a graphing calculator, or maybe you're using this one, if somebody will lend you theirs, I would definitely ask for that favor. And you'll see today just a couple of things this one can do that this one has a harder time doing. So let's see, most of you have a graphing calculator. So again, if you don't have one, it's okay. I would see if you can borrow one from the library or from a friend, or buy one if you're able to. They don't lose their value much. So if you pay for one of these, it's around $120. Let's say you only use it for the ACT and you end up majoring in English and you don't need a graphing calculator when you get to college, you should be able to get at least 50% of what you paid back when you sell it to another student. Let's see here. So a couple of you have the TI-84 Plus CE. Then we see some other calculators represented here too. So 3 of you have the TI-89, TI-92, or TI-Inspires CAS. So I can't see who responded with those, but they are actually banned on the ACT. They are not allowed. So you will not be able to use it on the ACT. There is a chance that you will get a proctor that maybe doesn't notice that you are using one of those, and you get away with it. There's a small, very small chance that that happens, but it's not worth taking that risk, because if they see that calculator on your desk, they have every right to tell you to put it away. And then you're stuck with no graphing calculator for the whole ACT. I hope that's not the worst news that you've ever received. I used to use the TI-89 specifically. I love that calculator, but then I got rid of it because it's not allowed on the ACT. So let me just share both the ACT and the SAT's calculator policy so you can see it for yourself. So this is going to be the ACT calculator policy. And then this is the SAT calculator policy. So you'll notice that the ACT's calculator policy is way stricter than the SAT's calculator policy. And I think that's partly due to the ACT allowing the graphing calculator. on the whole math section, right? The ACT allows you to use it for all the questions. So they're a little stricter when it comes to what kind of graphing calculator you can use, because they don't want you to use one that can do everything for you. Even though it's kind of silly, because this calculator can pretty much do everything for you too, for the most part, but they are strict about that. So if you have the TI-89, TI-92, or TI-Nspire CAS specifically, I would see if you can trade. Maybe those are fancy calculators, so you should be able to trade someone for this one, or sell it and then buy this one, or borrow this one from someone. So you have some options there if you were planning to use those. Okay, let's dive on into the calculator. So I'm going to share my calculator screen with you guys so you can see what I see. And for most of these questions, I'm going to be using the TI-84 plus CE. If it's going to be different to use that app or feature in the TI-84 or 83 plus, I will tell you so. And then if you are using a TI-Nspire or a calculator other than those two, I would encourage you to make note of the features I am using in these graphing calculators, and then just look up your calculator's user manual and see how you could perhaps do the same things in your graphing calculator. So let's see here. I'm going to share the results of this poll so you guys can see it. And then I also have my graphing calculator here. And let me just pull this up and we'll dive on in. So there is a lot to know with your graphing calculator. I will tell you, if you're planning to change which calculator you're going to use on ACT day, the sooner you change it, the better, so that you can get comfortable using that calculator, right? I just stopped the wrong screen share. Okay, no more technological difficulties here. Let me just move everything around, move my face around on the screen so I don't see myself. And here we go. So for the graphing calculator, we need to know what most of these buttons mean, but not all of them. So the first thing I want you to know about is just the mode button. So the mode button we're going to use if we have to answer a question that's in scientific notation. We can change this to psi, so that would give us something in scientific notation. So let's say I change this to psi, and then I have 5 times 10 to the -3 divided by 8 times 10 to the 8th power, or 8 times, oh, I put 8 instead of 10. That's okay. This is just an example. So I have 8 times 10 to the 8th power in the denominator. And then it gives me my answer in scientific notation. So 6.25 times 10 to the -12. The ACT loves asking scientific notation questions. And if you know that you can just change the mode in your calculator to scientific notation, then you don't need to know the scientific notation rules, how to multiply, divide, add, or subtract those. You don't need to know it, because you can just change your calculator's mode to scientific notation. If I had inputted that same information in the normal mode, it may give me my answer in scientific notation, but let's say I just put this in here. It's not going to give me my answer in scientific notation. If I switch it back to scientific notation, and I go up and I select this and I press enter, now it's giving me my answer in scientific notation. So that's going to just be something useful to know for any scientific notation questions. Let's also look in mode, add radians and degrees. So one of the most common questions I get from students is, should my calculator be in degrees or radians for the ACT? And the truth is, there's no right answer here. You can have it in either one, but you have to look at each question that deals with degrees or radians and then make sure that your calculator is in the right mode for those. So whenever I have questions that deal with triangles or circles or trigonometric functions, I'm going to note, are my answer choices in degrees or do I see pi there? If I see pi, that means my calculator needs to be in radians. If I see degrees, then my calculator needs to be in degrees. And that's going to be the main things that we're going to use here, just radians or degrees, and then normal or scientific mode. You can see down here that you can also change it to giving you answers containing complex numbers, but we're rarely going to use that, if ever, but it's just good to know that's in there, and everything else I leave alone. If you are using a calculator that belonged to an older sibling or a friend, or you're borrowing one, or you have a little brother or sister that played around with your calculator, we're going to want to reset our calculator to begin with. That's another important thing to know. So I just press second and then the plus sign, and that goes to memory. So do you see how the blue button says second and then memory is also in blue? That means I need to press second in order to access the memory. And then I can go down here and I can just reset this calculator to all the default factory settings. So if anybody changed something to something weird, I can just reset it, which is very nice. Let's see other things we can do in here. So we looked at the mode button, right? That's where we go for scientific notation, radians, and degrees. Let's also look at this delete button. So if I typed in 89 times 56 minus 3 plus 28 minus 89, and I wanted my calculator to perform that operation, and then I look back down at my paper and I think, oops, this 3 should have been a 4. I can easily just type the 4 over it. But let's say I look back and I see my 56 should have been 560, and I forgot to put that 0 in there. If I put the 0 there, it just writes over that minus, right? And then everybody has that moment of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to rewrite everything because I forgot that one number. But on the graphing calculator, I can hover over that minus symbol and then just press second delete. And that now allows me to insert that 0 without having to rewrite everything. So that's going to be another really useful button, just our delete and insert button. And then we can find this, right? Another just basic useful button will be our log button, right? This assumes the log has a base of 10. Our second pi, our pi button. Something to note, whenever you are using your graphing calculator, we must use parentheses. Your calculator cannot do PEMDAS for you. It's not reliable for that. So if I wanted to see, hey, what is 2 divided by 3 pi? And I didn't use parentheses, my calculator would say that's 2.094. But if I did 2 divided by 3 pi in parentheses, it gives me 0.2122. Well, that's silly, right? I need to use those parentheses around the 3 pi in order to get the right answer. So what is my rule for that? Whenever I use pi in the graphing calculator, I'm going to put it inside of parentheses. I'm not going to not use parentheses, okay? So pi, super duper important. Okay, other good things for us to know. Our math button. So our math button can, of course, convert decimals to fractions. So let's say I had 580 divided by 600, and I needed to just have that in the most reduced fraction. It would give me this, but then I can go math, frac, and it converts it to a fraction. Let's say I had a mixed number. Let's say we had 890 divided by 600, and I needed to write that as a mixed number, I would go to math and then scroll over to frac and go to the very last option here and press enter. It would first give it to me as a fraction, and then I would press math again, go over to frac, go over to the last option, press enter, and it gives me a whole number and that fraction without needing to figure out what is that as a mixed number. So that's really convenient too. Back to our math button, we can find the nth root here. So x and then the root allows us to just type in any root here. So let's say we wanted to find the 8th root of a really big number. It will just find it for us. Of course, I still want you to know all your rational exponent rules, but when you're in a pinch, it's really useful to know that is there. Let's go back to the math button. One of my favorite features on the graphing calculator is going to be Numeric Solver. That's our very last listing in the math button, so Numeric Solver. And this is something that you're gonna find on the TI-84 plus CE. That's going to be a little bit harder to use on the TI-84 plus. Let me see, I have a question here. Yeah, Brooke, I am going to share this recording afterwards. So, and I have that happen with students a lot of the time where they don't have the graphing calculator the first time I go over this stuff, and then they end up getting the graphing calculator, and then they just rewatch the recording and try it out on their own. So I will be sharing this recording. Okay, so let's put an equation in here. Let's say we had 2x plus 3 equals -10 minus 5x. And I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to press graph. And it solves for x there for me. So this is really useful. So I'm going to use equation solver for any linear equation. So let's see, and we'll try out some of these calculator features in that 2019 to 2020 practice test. Once I've kind of demoed all of them for you, we'll try it out on some real questions. So that was equation solver. It's the last one in this list. It's called Numeric Solver in the list, and then once you press enter, it's called equation solver. So you'll hear me call it both things: equation solver, numeric solver, usually just equation solver. And the first box is just the left-hand side of the equation, and the second box is the right-hand side of the equation. And then we press enter, and then to solve it, we press the graph button. Let's quit out of that one and then go back to math. And every now and then, so if you want a 34 plus on the ACT, you may need to use the summation button every now and then. It's not going to be guaranteed that you're going to get a question requiring the summation button on your ACT math section. So I don't generally teach it unless a student asks me about it specifically, and then we pull up the question and go over it. If you are not looking to score a 34 plus on the ACT math section, I wouldn't even worry about that button, really. There's much more important things to know in your calculator. And then the log base button, so convenient. We can enter a log of any base, and the crazy thing on the ACT is they will ask you log questions with a base other than 10, and you can just plug it into your graphing calculator. So I call those freebie questions. It's why would you not get this right? You can just plug it into your graphing calculator. Those are going to be my favorite. And then if we go to the math button, let's see what else we have here. There's so many goodies in the math button. We also have the Piecewise function. So this was recently released by the ACT, but not by the ACT, sorry, by Texas Instruments. So it was a recent release to use the Piecewise function. So if you have an older one of these and you don't see it in your calculator, you may need to plug your calculator into your computer and update the software by going onto the Texas Instruments website. Something to note for everyone joining me here today, so the calculator can do awesome things. The ACT is really particular about what you can and cannot do on the graphing calculator. So do not store equations in your calculator, and also do not download random apps from the internet onto your graphing calculator. That could get you disqualified. And it could be an honors violation that gets reported to colleges, so don't do that. Last one here in the math feature is going to be our piecewise, and let's look at how we would use that. We would first go to y equals, and let me just clear what I have here. And let's say I want to enter a piecewise function. I would first press math and then go down to piecewise, press enter, and let's do one that just has 2 pieces for the sake of time. And I would enter my first equation. So let's just say y equals x squared when x is greater or equal to 0. So to get to that greater or equal to 0 symbol, we are going to press second math. And then I can scroll down to the greater or equal to 0. So, oops, I forgot to put my x as greater or equal to 0. So I'm going to press second delete, so I can insert my x there without having to go back and start over. So x is greater than or equal to 0. And then for my next equation, I'm going to say y equals x plus 2. When x, and we'll just pick one here, so second math, when x is less than, let's do -5, and let's graph that. And it graphs the pieces. So whenever you see piecewise functions on the ACT, you can use your calculator for the whole section. Just graph it in your calculator. Match what is on your screen to the graphs that they're having you pick from. I use the same method for any transformation questions. I'm just going to graph whatever they gave me and then match what is on my calculator screen to my options for those questions. So this is our piecewise feature. While we're on the topic of graphing, I'm going to detour slightly, and we're just going to go look at apps, and I'm going to turn on in equals. So I'm going to press enter, and it's kind of anticlimactic. It's as if nothing happened, but everything changed. So when I go over here and I clear that equation, let's just put in x plus 3, and for the next one, just put 2x. And I want these to be inequalities, so I'm going to go to the left until a box appears around y, and then I will press enter, scroll down to the second one, and let's find an inequality symbol. So I'm just going to pick that one, press enter to OK, and then for the next one, I'm going to press enter, go down to the y. Let's make this when it's less than. And let's change this to -2x. I'm pretty bad at making up problems on the fly, so we'll see what these graphs look like. Oh, I picked less than for both. I want to make that greater than. There we go. I want these to be a little different. And I'm going to graph them. Ooh, and it shades it for me. And I can see where both graphs shading overlap is where my solution would be. So super duper convenient. To just use in equals when graphing inequalities. So remember, to get there, I went to apps and I just scrolled down to in equals and I turned it on. And now I'm going to turn it off. So I'm going to enter in equals and I'm just going to say quit. And I like quitting out of it when I'm no longer using it, so that those inequality symbols go away here and I don't have to actually go left until a box appears around it and then change that symbol. It's just kind of a waste of time. Okay, after that little detour to apps to look at an equals, let's go back to the math button. So we already looked at everything here in the first column that's going to be important. I also want to go over one to num. So for a num, we have the absolute value bars as our first option. Super useful if we want to find the absolute value of anything. We can just enter those absolute value bars, press enter, and it gives us our answer. We can also graph absolute value. So math over 1, absolute value, and let's just graph the absolute value of x plus 2 minus 9. Let's graph that. And it graphs it for us. So super convenient too to use that. Let's go back to the math. And I hope you guys are kind of noticing whenever I quit out of something, I just go second mode. And that takes me back to my home screen. So if I'm in an app and I want to go back, I just press second mode. So let's click on the math button, and we're going to go over here to num. I may in the future, I don't know if it's really worth it to look at it today, but they have some other useful things here that have not been of incredible use for me on the ACT, so I don't generally teach it, but just know it's here. So this first one is the least common multiple. Then we have the greatest common divisor. And then we also have the remainder. So it will find the remainder if you divide something by something else. But I don't really use those. It's generally going to be faster to just find it by figuring it out on your own versus using those. I don't really use this complex column on the ACT. It's not that useful, but I do use probability here. So let me pull up just really quickly. I want to go check your responses. I think most of you said you did not really like permutations and combinations. Let me just pull that up. Let's see if I remember that right. Yeah, so more than half of you do not like permutations or combinations. That's not a surprise to me at all. Most students do not, and this is where we would go for permutations, combinations, and factorials. And I will show you how to use this in workshop 2. So next time we'll go into this, but for today, I just want you to know it's there. So we have NPR, that's going to be for permutations. We have NCR for combinations. And then we also have the factorial button. That one. So those are going to be 3 useful things on more advanced ACT math questions. Remember, you're going to have easy, medium, and hard questions. You get the same point whether you answer an easy question correctly or a hard question correctly. So before you start worrying about permutations and combinations, I would first make sure that you know how to graph, that you know how to use everything in this first column over here. So for probability, we have permutations, combinations, and then factorials. And then the last column here, we just have fractions. Okay, so ACT calculator section is so much more than SAT. So how many of you are taking both the SAT and the ACT? Anybody? Just raise your hand if you're taking both. So things I've shown you so far that you would not really ever need to use on the SAT. So the SAT wouldn't really ask you any question that deals with summation. So this is an ACT only. I'll show you everything that's ACT only. Summation, ACT only. A log with a base other than 10, ACT only. Piecewise functions, possible to be on the SAT, but highly unlikely. This is going to be ACT only for the most part. If we go over to probability, permutations and combinations and factorials, pretty much ACT only. I have not seen these on any SAT question ever. It doesn't mean that they can never ask you about it. It just means it's extremely unlikely. Maybe you have like a 1% chance of seeing questions on the SAT that deal with permutations, combinations, or factorials. So out of the things I've shown you so far, we would not use those on the SAT. Those are going to be ACT only things that we need to know in the graphing calculator. Let me just pull up my screen here. so I can keep track of everything that I am showing you guys. Let's see here. So we looked at the math key. Let's go to apps next. So apps would probably, other than equation solver, which I really love to use, I love the apps on the graphing calculator. It's just once you start using them, how could you not? And we know for the ACT, it's a fast test, right? They give you 60 math questions in 60 minutes. So let's say you could answer one of the questions without using an app. If you choose to do so, please make sure that you can do it faster than the app can, because you only get so much time. So I want you to answer questions accurately and efficiently. So let's look here at apps. The first one that I want you to know is the Conex app. We would only really use the circle one on the ACT. It's possible that you may need to graph an ellipse, hyperbola, or a horizontal parabola, but kind of unlikely. So the circle one is really the only one that I want you to worry about initially for the ACT. So I can press enter here and I can graph a circle. But let's say our circle equation is not in our standard form here, where we have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. That's the circle equation we're most familiar with, right? hk is our center, r is our radius. Let's say they gave us a circle in the second form and they wanted us to find the center or the radius. We would need to complete the square to go from the second form to the first form if we were not using the graphing calculator. But if we are using the graphing calculator, let's say I'm going to attempt to make a circle here. I'm not sure if this is going to go well, but we'll see if it does, if this is a circle. I'm just going to put in some random coefficients. Let's see if this is an, ooh, it's a circle, yay. So let's say we needed to find the radius in the center of that circle. I would need to press the trace button and then kind of estimate. So we're gonna go in a counterclockwise direction here. This is really time consuming. We're guesstimating a little bit because we can't physically move our cursor to the center. So instead, I'm gonna press second mode and then go back to that circle equation, just as we entered it in here, right? With all our coefficients. And the trick here, and I want everyone to pay attention to this if you haven't used this before, we're just going to press alpha, enter, and it gives us our center and our radius for that circle, okay? So let me show you one more time. So circle, we just entered in the equation exactly as written. So we matched up our coefficients with A, B, C, and D. And then we just pressed alpha, enter. And it gives us our center and our radius. You can use that alpha enter trick in any of the Conex apps there. So if we were graphing an ellipse and we needed to find, let's do a random one here. Oh, I have one in here already. Let's just put in alpha, enter. Whoops. No, that's one that's not allowed. Let me pull up a ellipse equation really quickly that I'll just match up so that you can see what it looks like in here. We'll just do a basic one. So I'm just going to do, oops, let's do this first one. And I'm just going to say A is 1, B is 2, and I'm going to make these 0. And then we're going to press graph. Why doesn't it want to go? I'm having a hard time making up a problem here. Let's try this one. HK graph. Let me try a different one. That one should work though. X squared plus y squared. That's what happens when I make up problems. They don't go as planned. Let's see here. X minus h squared, y minus k squared, a squared plus b squared. A would be, let's try switching these or just making them the same. No, we'll make this 1. There we go. Crisis averted. So if I put in that ellipse, I first wanted to make sure it's a real ellipse. That's the only reason I graphed it. I can just press alpha enter here and it gives me my center and my foci. So if you are the lucky one that gets an ellipse or a hyperbola question on your ACT, remember, you can just go to your apps and put it in here and just press alpha enter after you enter the equation, and it gives you your important details for the ellipse or hyperbola, or you can press the graph button and it graphs it for you if it's just a matter of matching up what they gave you to a graph. So that's your other option there. Okay, that was a slight little detour there, but that's okay. Let's look at other apps we need to know. So we looked at the Conex one. We looked at in equals. Remember, that was for graphing inequalities. And then I also want to look here at Polysmelt. This is going to be my most frequently used app on the graphing calculator, Polysmelt. So I'm going to press enter. And let's say I just want to find x for a quadratic or a polynomial. I would use polynomial root finder. Let's say we just have a quadratic. Our order is the highest degree. For a quadratic, that would be x squared, right? And everything else I would leave alone here. And then the bottom row, to control these buttons, we use the top row of our graphing calculator. So to press next, we would have to press graph. To go back to main, we would press y equals. That kind of makes sense to you guys, I hope. So I'm going to press graph, and let's just put in a polynomial here. So I'm going to put 1x squared plus 6x plus 9, and then graph to solve it. And it gives me x equals -3. And this is going to look pretty much the same for the most part if you're using the TI-84 instead. It should look the same. Let's go back here to polynomial root finder, and I could put in a polynomial with an order of 3 too and solve for x. So whenever I'm solving for x and I'm given a polynomial that's a quadratic, or I have an exponent for a variable raised to 3 or higher, I am going to use Polysmelt. If I am given a linear equation to solve, I am going to go to math and then just up 1 to Numeric Solver. So this one that's located in math, I would use for linear equations, and apps, Polysmelt, I would use for quadratics and other polynomials. We also have Simultaneous Equation Solver here in Polysmelt. Simultaneous Equation Solver, I can use to solve an equation when I am given 2 equations and 2 unknowns. So let's just press next here. And let's say I had 5x plus 2y equals -8, and 3x minus 1y equals 2, and I wanted to solve that. It would give me what x and y is equal to. That's our intersection of those 2 lines. If my answer choices are in decimals, I can just press the graph button again, and it gives these to me in decimals. So I can press that graph button to switch from decimals to fractions. I want to look at Simultaneous Equation Solver in this calculator too, because it's going to look a little bit different. So let me change my calculator here to the TI-84 Plus. So in the TI-84 Plus, we would press apps and then go down to Polysmelt, Let me find it here. Press enter. And then I'm going to go to simultaneous equation solver, 2 equations, 2 unknowns. I'm going to press graph to go next. And here we are given a matrix. So imagine we have 2.4x minus 1.5y equals 0.3. And then in the next line, we have 1.6x plus 0.5y equals negative 1.3. So this thick vertical line is basically our equal signs. And then we are assuming we have x and then y equal to a constant. So in this calculator, they assume that your math knowledge is advanced enough that you know that. This is still really, really useful for you to know if you are using the TI-84 plus CE though. So let's say we solve this, it gives us x and y. Let's go back to the TI-84 plus CE, and I'll show you guys why you need to know that even if you're using this calculator. So let's switch it to the TI-84 plus CE. So I'm going to go to apps, and then I'm going to go down to Polysmelt and Simultaneous Equation Solver. Let's say I am given 2 equations, but I have 3 unknowns. I have x, y, and z. So whenever I have more unknowns than equations, so let's say 2 equations and 3 unknowns, or 3 equations and 4 unknowns, I am going to have to know how to deal with the matrix form for this. So let's say 2 equations and 3 unknowns, and then I'm going to press graph to go next, and it shows it to me in a matrix. So I need to know that I have the coefficient of x, then the coefficient of y, then the coefficient of z equal to a constant. And then for the next row, I need to line up the x, y, and z again. So this is really useful to know even if you're using the TI-84 plus CE. Let's go back here, make sure we covered all our apps. So we have an equals, Conex, and Polysmelt. Those are the only apps that you need to know for test day. See other things we need to know in the graphing calculator. There's quite a few things. Let's see here. Let's look at the stat key. So for stats, we need to know how to find the mean, the median, and the standard deviation using the calculator. So I'm going to press stat and then edit. And let's just enter a list of numbers here. So I'm putting in my list, and then I'm going to press second mode to quit out of it. And after I've entered my list, remember to enter my list, I press stat and then edit. Now, to use that list, I'm going to press second stat. And I'm going to scroll over to math. And here I can find my mean, my median. I can even find the sum of the list of numbers if I needed to. And I can find my standard deviation. So let's say we want our standard deviation of that list. I would press enter here. And then I would press second stat again and insert list 1 and then press enter. So I know my standard deviation of that list of numbers is 2.5. I can also press second stat, go over to math, and find my mean. Remember, your mean is when you add up a list of numbers and you divide by however many numbers there are. And I'm going to press second stat again, list 1, and enter, and that gives me my mean of list 1. So super useful to just know that about the stat buttons. Let's see other things you need to know, if any. Okay, really useful thing is the store button. Has anybody here ever used the store key? Raise your hand if you've ever used the store key. Ooh, a couple have. That's great. So let's say I am plugging in, I'm picking numbers for the insert choices. So I'm picking that x is equal to 5. Let's say that. So anytime I'm putting in X, I am really putting in 5. When is this useful? This would be useful for an f of X question where they're giving you a function, and let's say they say X is equal to negative 0.5, and you need to find what the function's equal. I could put in negative 0.5 and then press store it as X. And now let's say we want to find 5x squared minus 2x plus 9. And it gives us the correct answer. If I was just plugging in negative 0.5 for x and I put in 5 times negative 0.5 squared minus 2 times negative 0.5 plus 9, let's see what that gives us. A different answer. Uh-oh, which one's right? Well, the one where I stored the variable is correct, because when you're storing a number as a variable, you don't have to worry about parentheses. If you don't do that, you have to worry about parentheses. So if I didn't store that negative 0.5 as x, I would have had to put in 5, open parentheses, negative 0.5 squared minus 2 times negative 0.5 plus 9. So that matches our stored variable equation, right? And we can see just storing that variable enables us to have way fewer keystrokes, which makes us faster, which is always a good thing, right? Making ourselves a little bit faster. So we need to know about the store button. We also need to know about the I button. So if I press second and then the period, it gives me I. So let's say I needed to find 5 divided by 2 minus 8. If I was not using the graphing calculator, I would need to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate, which would be 2 plus 8i. The calculator performs the conjugate for us. So if I press enter here, it found the conjugate, it multiplied it by the conjugate, but this is a kind of icky answer. So I'm going to press math frac to give it to me in the nice a plus bi form. So whenever I see I on an ACT question, I'm going to think, can I just use my I button? I probably can. And let's see, one final thing. Does anybody here not know how to find the vertex of a parabola or the intersection of two lines when you're graphing? Okay, so let's look at that just real quickly to make sure we know all our stuff. So if I have x squared, let's say minus 8, and we graph that, and I needed to find my x-intercepts here, I could go second table and see what is x when y is 0, but it doesn't even appear in my table. So let's go back to our graph, and we're just going to press second trace and go down to 0. And we're going to have to calculate 1 0 at a time. So let's first calculate this left bound 0. So it's going to say left bound. So we want to be to the left of the 0 and press enter. Then it's going to ask right bound. So we want to be to the right of the 0. And then it's going to ask us to guess. So we're just going to line up our cursor to where the point is that we're trying to find and press enter. And it gives us our 0. We can do the same process for that 0 on the right. Let's say this line was being intersected by the line y equals x, by that line. So each of these intersections would be solutions to the equations. So I can press second calc and press intersect, and I can find what that one solution is. So it's going to ask me what's my first curve, and then I need to make sure that I'm on my second curve. Then it's going to ask me to guess again. And it gives me my intersection occurs when x equals 3.37 and y equals 3.37. Let's go back to y equals, just clear out this one, the second equation. Let's say we needed to find that vertex. In this case, the vertex is a minimum. So we would press second calc, or second trace, which is calc, and then go down to minimum. And then it's going to ask me to the left, and then to the right, and then guess. Thank goodness I can mute when I sneeze for you guys, so you don't have to hear me sneezing. Terrible allergies. Okay, so we're going to guess that point, and it gives us our minimum is when x is 0 and y is -8. Super important for you to know that too. How many? Let me look back at the poll results. I'm still sharing those. Did not need to share it for that long. There's a couple of you that wanted 32 or higher on the ACT. And to get to the 32 or higher, you need to know about matrices. And we'll see if we have time to cover it in these workshops, but there's a lot of ground to cover. So I'm not sure if we'll get totally to it, but I want you to know that your graphing calculator can multiply or add matrices for you. So let's say we are given 2. And then I always, this is muscle memory for me, so I need to do it on this calculator so I know where to press for you guys. Okay, so we're gonna press 2, and then we're gonna press alpha zoom. And here it gives us matrices. So let's say I wanna put in a matrix that has 2 rows and 3 columns. And then I can, oops, why did I press? Clear instead of OK. So I want OK, there we go. I can enter my matrix here. So let's say we had 3, 8, -1, 2, 5, and 1. And it will multiply each part of that matrix by 2 for me without me necessarily needing to know that's how it works. I'm going to pull up a quick matrix example. If I can here, I'm not going to pick numbers for this because it won't go well. I know that much. Oops. Probably press something I shouldn't have on my calculator here. Let's see. So whenever you are multiplying matrices, and this is on the last page of the ACT Core Concepts handout, the number of columns have to equal the number of rows. So let's put in a matrix here. Let's multiply 2. So I'm just going to clear this. And let's do a new one. So I'm going to just, and I need to always, I'm going to press alpha zoom. Let's do a 3-row, whoops, 3-row by 2-column matrix. And we're going to go down, press OK. And I'm just going to enter the numbers here as 3, 4, 2, 9, 5, and then 7, and I'm going to multiply this matrix by another one. There we go. And I'm going to multiply it by a new one. So I'm going to press alpha zoom again. And this time I'm going to say it has 2 rows and 3 columns because my number of columns in the first one has to equal my number of rows in the second, vice versa here. So let's go OK. And I'm going to put in 3, 1, 5, and then 6, 9, 7. And then we're just going to press enter. And the calculator finds the product of those matrices for us. So super useful. Remember to get there, I pressed alpha zoom. There are, I think, like 3 or 4 other ways to get to access matrices in the graphing calculator, but I find this is the fastest, most efficient way to get there. Okay, so now that we have looked at all of these different math features, let's look at some actual questions, right? Let's try some of these out. So I'm going to pick a couple out of that ACT 2019 to 2020 practice test for you guys to try it out on. So I'm going to pull up, let me pull up a blank test. This is going to get very tricky with the screen sharing, but I think we'll be able to do it. I'm going to scroll before I show you guys so you don't get car sick. Let's see here. And I'm just going to try something really quickly here. Let's see here. Let's try this question. I'm going to start up easy on you guys. Or actually, let me do it this way. I'm going to switch my method here so that we can do this most efficiently and I'm not switching back and forth constantly. So I'm going to just pull up a blank practice test on my computer, and then I can share my whole desktop and you can see both my calculator and the question at the same time. If I share from my iPad, you can only see one at a time, and then it's going to be a lot of going back and forth, which won't be as fun. So let me just open a couple of practice tests here. Okay. Give me 1 second. We'll close this, have this. Whoops. It's going to be a lot of things going on here. But we can survive this technology. Okay. There we go. Let me share my whole desktop. Thank you for your patience. Aha. Okay. So share. You should be seeing my whole desktop here, and I'll just put my little face over here and move this down. There we go. Let's try. Let's start off pretty easy here. I'm going to just zoom in. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds to do question number 25 here in your calculator. So just 30 seconds for that question. Try it out on your own before I show you how. Okay, so we're going to start by just opening up parentheses, and then we're going to put in 4.8, and then second comma. That gives us our times 10 button to the -7, close parentheses, divided by open parentheses, 1.6, second comma, times 10 to the -11, close parentheses, press enter. And it gives it to us not in scientific notation, right? I hope you guys caught my mistake here. I should have started by going to mode, switching it to scientific notation. And then if I go up and I enter that again, it's going to give my answer, which is 3 times 10 to the 4th power. So the correct answer here would be answer choice A. And we can easily find that by just putting it in our graphing calculator. Let's look at some other just fast and easy ones we could find that don't have a lot of math involved. It's just straight calculator questions. Let's look at question 27 here. So they ask, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Which of the following expressions is a factor of x cubed minus 64? So I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds to think of where you would go in your graphing calculator and how you could find that answer. So we would go to apps and then scroll down to Polysmelt and go to polynomial root finder. Our order here is 3 because x is cubed. And then I'm going to press graph to go next. My x cubed coefficient is 1. There is no x squared term, so I'm just going to leave that as 0 times x squared. That basically takes that x squared term away. And then 0 times x, and then our constant term is negative 64. I'm going to press enter. Always make sure that what's on your calculator screen matches what's in the question, that you didn't mistype anything. And then I'm going to press graph to solve it, and it gives me x equals 4. If x equals 4, that means that x minus 4, or answer choice A, is a factor. Remember, factors of a polynomial are the same as zeros. So you want to set each factor equal to 0. So we would have to subtract 4 from both of these sides. So we'd have x minus 4 equals 0. So answer choice A for that one. Let's look at question 23 here. Who can tell me what I would use in my calculator to answer this question? For question 23. I'm going to look in the chat. Who knows what we can use for 23 in the calculator? And I'll give you a couple of seconds to try it too. Yes, Emma, you can use Numeric Solver. Let's try this out. So we would go to Math, and then up 1, Numeric Solver. And in the first box, I'm just going to type in, so 8% of 60 is just 0.08 of means multiply. So 0.08 times 60 is the equal sign. So I need to move over to the second box, is 1/5. So I'm going to put in 1 divided by 5, 1/5 of means multiply, right? Of what number? My what number is just going to be x, and then I'm going to press enter. And then to solve this, I'm going to press the graph button, and it gives me x equals 24, which is answer choice C. And that is our right answer for number 23. Let's look at number 15. This is another easy graphing calculator question. So we're just going to go to Math, and then over 1 to absolute value. And then I'm going to press Math, go over 1 to absolute value again. And I'm going to put in -8 plus 4. And then minus Math, go over 1 to absolute value, 3 minus 9. Could you do this without using a graphing calculator? Sure, you could. But it's going to be really fast with one. Oops, I left my calculator in scientific notation, so I'm going to go back to normal and then go up and select this. And it gives me that my answer here should be 2, which is answer choice D. So D as in dog would be the right answer here. +2 is what we're looking for. Let's try question number 13 here. Who knows what we would use in the graphing calculator for question 13? Let's see. Yay, Lauren, you're right. Polysmelt 2. So let's try that. So I'm going to go to apps and then go down to Polysmelt, my favorite app. I swear I'm going to have a t-shirt made that just says Polysmelt across the front. because I love Polysmelt. And I'm going to go to Simultaneous Equation Solver. I have 2 equations, and I have 2 unknowns, and then I'm going to go next. My first equation, I'm going to have 8x, but there's no y. So I'm just going to say 0y equals 12. And then for my second equation, I don't have an x, so I'm just going to say 0x plus 2y, but uh-oh, I don't have room for a constant term on the left-hand side. So I need to move that positive 10 over to the right. So to do that, I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So I'm going to have 10 minus 10 is 0, so I got rid of the 10. And then 22 minus 10 is 12. So this equation also equals 12. And then I'm going to press graph to solve it. And then they want to know what is the sum of the solutions. So they want to know what is x plus y. So that's going to be 6 plus 1.5, which gives us 7.5, which is B, 7.5. Let's try number 8. What could we do for number 8 here to quickly solve this in the graphing calculator? For number 8. Great, Emma. Yes, store. So I could go and just press 1/2, so 0.5, and then store that as x. And then I'm just going to say 8x minus 3 divided by x, and it gives me x equals 2, which is G, and that is the right answer there. See if there are other good graphing calculator ones here. We could also do the same thing for question number 4. So here they have, let f be defined as f of x equals 5x squared minus 7 times 4x plus 3. What is the value of f of 3? So that's asking us, what is y equal to when x equals 3? So I can just store 3 as x and just plug that in, and we would get 5x squared minus 7 times 4x plus 3. And it gives us negative 60, and that's J, and that's the right answer. So it's just really time efficient. Let's look at number 3 here. So I have a rule, and I don't know if this calculator may malfunction on me today, that I only use equation solver for linear equations. But every now and then it does work for exponential equations where we have variable exponents. So let's go to math and then up 1, go to numeric solver, and I'm going to say 2 to the 2x plus 7 equals 2 to the 15th power. And I'm going to press enter and then graph to solve it. And it gives me x equals 3.999. And I can just round that to 4, that x equals 4. What else could I use to solve this equation if I was not using equation solver? Who knows? How could I solve number 3 if I didn't know that just because the bases are equal to, I could just say 2x plus 7 equals 15, right? And just solve for x. But let's say I didn't know that. What could I do? Yeah, I can drop the base, but let's say we didn't know that. We were just clueless. We can plug in the answer choices. So whenever we have variables in the question stem and we have numbers in the answer choices, that means we can plug them in. So I could try, what is 2 to the 2 times 2? I'm just plugging in 2 for x, plus 7, right? And make sure that that equals 2 to the 15th. And it does not, so I would eliminate answer choice A. I actually want to try something out here with you guys today. The reason I know all of these things in the graphing calculator is because it's pretty much my hobby to try out different things. So I'm going to try out something with you guys for the first time today. We'll see if it goes according to plan or not. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to say, let's store 2 as x, and I'm just going to say 2 to the 2x plus 7, and then I'm going to do 2 to the 15. So I know 2 doesn't work, but let's now store 4 as x. So I'm going to say 4, store that as x, And then I'm going to go up and just select that expression and press enter. Ooh, so yeah, this works. That's kind of nice. So I just had to type the expression out one time, and then I just changed what X was stored out. How fast can you possibly get with plugging in the answer choices? I don't think it gets faster than that. Let's see. I'm gonna look later on in this practice test, see if there are good graphing calculator questions. I'm gonna go in a different practice test. Let me just pull it up here. Don't want to make you guys car sick. Just scroll with you. Let's look at a really icky question. Where do I have? Yeah, let's look in this one. Scroll too far. Okay, let's look at question 57 here. That's like a really icky question. Remember, these questions go from easy, medium to hard. They say the functions y equals sine of x and y equals sine of x plus a plus b for constants a and b are graphed. The functions have the same maximum value. One of the following statements about the values of a and b is true. Which statements is it? So I am just going to pick numbers based on the conditions in the answer choices. So we're going to go to y equals, and I'm going to put in sine of x. Whoops, let's clear that. Sine of x. And then in the second equation, I am going to put in sine, open parentheses, whoops, x. And we need a is less than 0. So we're going to say sine of x minus 2. And b is 0. So I'm not going to put in plus 0 here, right? I can just leave that blank, not put anything there, and we're going to graph it. And we can see that these two graphs have the same maximum value, right? Let's go back. So A works, but we're going to try out some of the other answers here. If I go to B, where A is less than 0, but B is greater than 0, I'm just going to say plus 3 here and see what happens. Now I can see these lines do not match the graph that I have here on the left. So it can't be B. Then they say A equals 0. So I'm going to take out that. I'm just going to say minus 0, plus 3. And I can see, oh, those also don't have the same maximum value. So if I went through each of these, I would see that only answer choice A matches my graph. This is a really hard ACT math question, but if you're using your graphing calculator, it's not that bad at all. Okay, let me see if there are some other good ones in here. Oh, let's try 37. It's kind of a good one just to see how some of this stuff applies. 37. What is the difference between the mean and the median of this set of numbers? So I'm going to start by first clearing my list. So I'm going to go second plus, and I'm going to say clear all lists so that my list is clear. And then I'm going to go to stat, edit, and I'm going to enter that list of numbers. So 3, 8, 10, and 15. And I'm going to press second quit, second stat. Let's find our mean. So our mean of list 1 is 9. And let's find our median. Our median of list 1 is also 9. So our difference between our mean and our median, 9 minus 9 is 0. So our answer here would be A. Let's see this question, 36. We'll come back to 36. I'm going to be assigning this practice test to you guys. So that is one that you could potentially use your graphing calculator, but I actually wouldn't even advise it. I want to look at the straight graphing calculator questions. Let's look at 29 here. What is the product of the complex numbers -3i plus 4 and 3i plus 4? This is a freebie question, you guys. Product means multiply. All you need to know for this question is that. So I'm going to put in -3 second I plus 4, close parentheses, times 3 second I plus 4, close parentheses, and that gives me 25, which is answer choice C. So that's a freebie question. Let's look at another freebie question. And it's crazy that these are real ACT questions, straight from the makers of the ACT. I can't believe they would give you guys questions like this, but another scientific notation question. All we would have to do for this one, and I'm not going to go through the process right now, is go to mode, switch it to scientific notation, and then add those numbers. And it would give us our answer in scientific notation. So that's pretty awesome. Let's look at question number 10 here too. The table below shows the number of cars being sold each month last year. What is the median of the data table? So if you were not using your calculator, you would have to arrange those numbers from smallest to biggest, X out the smallest and biggest all along to find the median value. That can be time consuming and you can make a silly mistake. If we're using our calculator, we would just go first clear our list. So second mem, clear all lists. And then I would press stat, edit, enter in that list of numbers. And then I would press second stat, go to math, and just find my median of list 1. So that's going to be a super fast question in your calculator. Let's see, anything else? I don't think on this one. I'm going to pull up some other ones just to make sure we look at some good calculator questions here. Any questions so far while I pull up another question about any of the features I've shown you so far? Because you're pretty likely to be using that in the future. So I want to make sure that you're all really comfortable with them. I'm going to look at the Q&A and the questions just to see if anybody has questions before I show you more things. Okay, don't see any questions. So I'm going to show you a couple more things just to make sure that you're comfortable using the graphing calculator. Oops. I'm going into many different practice tests here, so it's a little time consuming. Ooh, let's look. Who wants to see a matrix question? A really icky one. I'm going to look for some hands. Ah, Emma does. Lauren, what kind of calculator are you using? It's going to be my first question if there's confusion. So let me switch it to, are you talking about stats or probability? Oops. Probability. So I'll switch my calculator face here to a TI-84 plus. And we would just go here to, let's see here, probability. So math, and then over to probability. And we have our NPR, NCR, an exclamation point. So permutations, combinations, and exclamation point. Do you have that on your calculator, Lauren? If you, yeah, so that's where we would have that. And I'm going to look at those during a different workshop. So there's 3 workshops in this series. So I'm going to go into that in another workshop because we can spend quite a bit of time just on that. For today, just wanted to make sure that you guys knew where everything was in the calculator. So let me see. I'm going to pull up, give me 1 second here. I'm going to stop this share just for a second while I pull up a new practice test. I'm going to make everybody car sick if I let you see the whole process of pulling it up. So I'm going to have to do a little hunt here. And the funny thing is, once you get better at using your calculators, some questions that may have been icky before might not be as icky. Okay, let's see here. So I can share my screen again. I'm sharing my whole desktop. Here we go. So let's look at question 42 here. This is from practice test 2 in this big red book. So if you guys are studying for the ACT outside of these workshops, something to note is you always want to use real ACT practice tests. So for this workshop series, I am providing you with PDFs of practice tests that have been released by the makers of the ACT. If you want to practice beyond that, get the real, what's this called? The official ACT prep guide. This would be a good book to use. I would not buy books from big publishers necessarily for ACT prep until you have worked through every single question in this book. So that should be your priority. Okay, let me see here. I don't have any questions. Let's look at this question. Who has any idea what we would do here? Because they say matrix product, so we know we just need to multiply those two matrices, but they up the difficulty here by putting in a variable. And our calculator won't let us just put in a variable. So what could we do here? Who has any idea? How could we possibly solve this? So whenever I have variables in my answer choices, that's a clue that I can pick numbers. So I'm just going to say that A equals 2. And then we're going to go to alpha zoom. Oh, let me get out of this calculator. But you can, it works the same in this one, in the TI-84 Plus. I am just more familiar at this point with the TI-84 Plus CE, but you can do either one. So alpha zoom. And then I have 2 rows. Nope, I have 3 rows, right, for that first one. And I have 1 column. Then I'm going to go down, press OK. And we're just going to put 2, because remember I said A equals 2. Whoops. Let me go up. So 2. And then 2 times 2 would be 4. And 2 times 3 would be 6. And then I'm going to multiply that by alpha zoom, 1 row, and 3 columns. Press OK. And I'm going to put in 1, 0, and -1. And then press enter. And it gives me 3 rows, 3 columns. And I see I need zeros through that middle column, right? And that only matches answer choice F. So I know F has to be my answer there, which is pretty nice. I didn't need to know all the rules about multiplying matrices, which can actually be really time consuming. Let me see here. Ooh, let's look at a really icky question in this practice test that a lot of students miss. So here, I'm going to just zoom out. Oops. Okay. They give us, oh, I don't want to do that. Stop that. Do not show again. There we go. They say use the following information to answer questions 32 to 34. The curve y equals that equation for 0, x is greater than 0, but is less than 200. And then we have these points. That's a pretty icky graph. What is the y coordinate for the point on the curve with x coordinate of 20? And people look at this graph and they're like, okay, x is 20, y is what, and they like can't really guesstimate it, and all those answer choices are so close together. So how on earth are you supposed to find this? Who knows? What is the y coordinate for the point on the curve with x coordinate 20? What could I do here? I'll just zoom out a little bit more so you can see the given information and then the question. It's pretty icky. What could we do? So little tip, and I don't want that to happen. Whenever they give you an equation, you're going to want to use it. So we are just going to say x is 20. So I'm going to store x as 20. So I'm going to say 20 store as x. And then I'm just going to find what is y when x is 20. So I'm going to say 0.005 x squared minus 2x plus 200. And it gives me 162, which is answer choice G. So super fast, not as icky as we may think when we first look at that question, right? It looks like a pretty icky question to begin with. Let's see any other ones in this test that maybe we wouldn't get to at a different point. That's about it. So we have a couple minutes. So for the last 10 minutes here, I'm going to just open it up to your questions because I'm sure at least one of you has questions after everything that I have shown you today, right? Like there's been quite a few things that maybe you didn't know before today. So if you have any questions, now's your time to ask them. Just gonna give a couple minutes here, see if you guys have any questions. While I'm waiting for questions, and you may be thinking of, oh my goodness, I didn't know I had any questions, or I don't want to ask them right now. Let's just recap what we looked at today. So we looked at how to use the math button, how to use the I key that's on the bottom here. We looked at always putting pi inside of parentheses, right? We looked at that. We looked at our apps, and the only apps we're really going to be using will be Polysmelt, N=, and Conex. Let's see, I do have a question here. Someone asked, where can I purchase a graphing calculator? So you can get them used from friends who no longer use them, or you can also get them, and I am not affiliated with TI-84 or Texas Instruments, but I'll send you a link to one of them, and you can buy them from Amazon or Target, Office Depot. They do vary depending on what color you get. So I like mint, so I got the mint one, but don't pay more just for a certain color. They're all going to be doing pretty much the same thing. So 120 is a reasonable price to pay for the graphing calculator. If you're paying more than 120, you are paying for the color. And the price can vary significantly depending on where you buy the calculator from. So if you're buying it from Amazon, you may get it for cheaper than Target, or if you're getting it from Office Depot on a sale. So just keep your eye out for it. See if there are any other questions. Ooh, what should I do if I don't have the same calculator and I couldn't figure out how to get all the stuff you talked about today? Anonymous attendee, what kind of calculator do you have? If you can just type in a follow-up question, I may be able to offer more assistance. And while I wait for your answer, I'm gonna pull something up here. Okay, so I'll show you how I would figure that out. Let me share my screen here. So you have a TI Inspire CX2. So I would, for each feature that I talked about, you can just go into Google and type in, let's say, solving systems of equations, TI Inspire CX2. And we have a little YouTube video that someone put up already about how to solve it. You can also, going on the Texas Instruments website is really useful. So let's open this. And then, oh, it's a document. Oops, let me share. I'm going to stop this share and then share the document screen. And here a document pulls up with all the step-by-step directions of how to do it. And most calculators come with really thick user manuals that can be a little intensive to read through. So you can also Google, let's say, TI Inspire CX2 user manual PDF, and then just download it and do Command Find or Control F to find those features in the user manual so that you don't have to read it cover to cover. So that's my advice for that. So most calculators should be able, a graphing calculator should be able to do at least 75% plus what I showed you in here today. It should be able to do most of the stuff. There might be one or two things that it can't do, and then you can always solve it algebraically also. Without a calculator, it just saves time. So I would either take the time to find the user manual, read about how your specific calculator can perform the functions that I showed you today, or if you run into trouble with that, I would see if you can trade your calculator or borrow this one from somebody just for test prep for taking the ACT and or SAT. So remember, it's really important to use the calculator that you're going to use on test day during practice. So you don't want to practice with a different calculator than what you're actually planning to use. Otherwise, you won't know how to find those features. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes here to see if anybody else has questions. Those were really good ones so far. So if you have any more questions, and I will be sending out an assignment for our second session. So our second session assignment is going to be more intense than the third session assignment. I always start off heavier and then pull back instead of piling everything on right off the bat or at the end. I'm just giving you guys a couple more minutes. And for anonymous attendee here, let me send you the Google search you can put in to find the user manual. So I just put it into Google and I was able to pull up the user manual. So it's pretty fast to do that. Let's see, we have another question. Somebody asked, can we still join the ACT Pro course? And you can. It's already been processing, so we've already had 2 sessions. So registration isn't live on my website, but I can find the link for that. If you still want to join, you would have access to the past recordings. So we are already 2 sessions in out of the 6 and those assignments, and then you would be able to join live or watch the recordings for the ones coming up. Let me find that link because it's not easy to access on my website. I have it hidden. So here is that link, if you want to see that. I think I shared it, yeah. So it's a special link to get there, but it's not too late. And I did have one student join at the end of last week that's just working through the recordings before our next session on Thursday. So if you're planning to join it late, you won't be the only one. Any other questions? But a couple more minutes, just make sure nobody has questions. I am going to send out, it should just automatically pop up on your screen after we're done today, but just in case it does not, or you close all your windows really rapidly, I'm going to send you a survey here, and that gives me some feedback about what you thought of the class today, anything you would change or have more or less of in the future, so that I can keep that in mind for future sessions. It's always useful for me to hear back from you guys. And actually, let me put, oops, that late registration for the ACT Pro course in here too. Just have like one more minute. I don't see any more questions from you guys. So I think everything was covered. Thank you so much for giving me 2 hours of your morning or afternoon. If you're not in Florida, if you're in a different time zone, I hope I'll see all of you back for the second workshop. The third, we will be building our knowledge with each workshop and getting better at the ACT, right? It's definitely possible to increase your score. I think all of your answers as far as score goals are reasonable. It's within your reach. It's really about putting in the practice, but also using the right tools, right? So if we're just taking practice tests after practice tests and we don't have those tools, it can be really hard. It can be challenging. So that's why today I wanted to first focus on how do we use our graphing calculator for the ACT so that you have that tool and you can just go collect those freebie points from questions where you can just plug it into your graphing calculator. Everything else in your Google Drive folder, let me just go back there really quickly and then we'll wrap up. So I'm going to just share my screen. Going to be the last thing we look at, just as a refresher. So just like the graphing calculator is a really useful tool, the core material in here is going to be a really useful tool for you. So this grammar handout, students that really study the grammar handout, they take practice tests, they review their answers to the practice test, and they think about what concept do they need to brush up on or remember for the next practice test, tend to get amazing English scores on the ACT. So 34 plus on the English section, regardless of what their ACT English baseline was to begin with. So that's going to be the easiest section to gain points. And this grammar handout and English core concepts handout is going to be your tool for that section, just like our calculator is our tool for the math section. Going through this ACT core concepts and critical thinking skills handout, understanding the reading section, English section, science, right? This is all going to be a tool that you can use. And I will share that bootcamp link if you have not had a bootcamp with me before and you want to just see each part of this in detail, that's going to be your other tool. So I am going to sign off for today. And I'll see you guys back next time. Hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.